Have you ever wondered if the Irish and Scottish are actually the same people, just living in different lands? They sound a bit alike. They look a bit alike. Their cultures seem similar. But are they truly one people split in two, or are they more different than we think? Let's uncover the ancient origins, the shocking connections, and the key differences between these two proud Celtic nations. By the end of this video, you'll know the truth about whether the Irish and Scottish are really the same people or not. Now let's get started. But first, let's take a step back in time, far before modern borders, flags, or nations ever existed. To truly understand the Irish and Scottish people, we need to go way back, to a time before written records, when history was passed down through stories, songs, and stone carvings. Back then, there was no Ireland or Scotland as we know them today. Instead, there were tribes, fierce, free, and full of spirit. These tribes were part of a larger group we now call the Celts. The Celts weren't just in the British Isles. In fact, they once covered much of ancient Europe, from Spain and France all the way to Central Europe and even parts of Turkey. But over the centuries, waves of conquest and empire pushed the Celtic peoples westward, toward the edges of the map. And where did they survive the longest? In Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. These western lands became the last strongholds of Celtic culture. While the rest of Europe changed, these regions held on to the Celtic languages, customs, symbols, and spiritual beliefs. So yes, both the Irish and Scottish people share the same ancient Celtic bloodline. Their music, myths, and even family names echo with the sound of a shared past. This isn't just a coincidence. It's a powerful clue that the Irish and Scottish didn't just come from similar lands. They came from the same cultural root. And that root is Celtic. Now let's look at something that connects people more deeply than we often realize, and that is language. One of the strongest and clearest links between the Irish and Scottish is their shared Gaelic roots. Long before English arrived in either land, both peoples spoke different forms of Gaelic, a language filled with history, poetry, and cultural pride. In Ireland, it became known as Irish Gaelic, often simply called Irish. In Scotland, it evolved into Scottish Gaelic. These are not two completely different languages, but rather siblings. Both descended from an older language known as Old Irish, which was widely spoken around 1500 years ago. This means the Irish and Scottish weren't just neighbors. They were once part of the same Gaelic-speaking world. Over time, geography, politics, and cultural shifts caused the languages to branch off slightly, but the core remained the same. Even today, if you hear a native speaker from either side, you'll notice similarities. Words like dia duit, which means hello, exist in both Irish and Scottish Gaelic, with only slight differences in pronunciation. The accent might sound different to the ear, but when you peel back the layers, you find the same roots, the same grammar, and often the same expressions. It's a living reminder that these two peoples were once deeply connected, not just by blood, but by voice. Language doesn't just tell stories, it carries identity. And in this case, Gaelic still whispers the truth of a shared origin between the Irish and the Scottish. Now let's dig even deeper. How did the Gaels even get to Ireland and Scotland? Most historians believe the Gaels first settled in Ireland, coming from mainland Europe, possibly around 500 BC or earlier. From there, a group of Gaelic settlers moved to western Scotland in the 5th and 6th centuries AD. They came from a part of Ireland called Dal Riata, and they brought their language, customs, and kingship systems with them. This Irish group helped form the foundation of the Scottish kingdom in the west, which later merged with the Picts to form what we now call Scotland. So we can say that early Scots were originally Irish settlers. In that sense, the Irish and Scottish do share the same ancient bloodlines, at least in part. Because of this shared origin, Irish and Scottish traditions look remarkably similar even today, almost like reflections of each other. Though they've lived in different lands for centuries, their customs often mirror one another, shaped by the same Celtic foundation. Take music, for example. Both cultures are famous for their haunting bagpipes, often played during ceremonies, marches, and celebrations. The sound may be loud and bold, but it carries deep emotion, especially when it echoes through the green hills of Ireland or the Scottish Highlands. Their clothing also reveals common threads. The kilt, often seen as a Scottish symbol, actually has roots in shared Celtic dress traditions. Tartan patterns, linked to family clans, exist in both Irish and Scottish history, though Scotland made them more widely known. When it comes to festivals, both peoples celebrated ancient Celtic holidays like Samhain, the festival marking the end of harvest season. Over time, this became what we now know as Halloween, but its roots are deeply spiritual, tied to nature and ancestral remembrance. Storytelling, song, and dance are lifelines in both cultures. Folk tales filled with heroes, fairies, and brave warriors still echo in Irish and Scottish homes alike. Even their symbols speak the same language. Celtic knots, the triskele, and the claddagh ring all represent unity, eternity, and love. In all these ways, the Irish and Scottish stand close together, like cousins who may live apart, but who were raised on the same stories, values, and spirit. Now here's where the story begins to shift. While the Irish and Scottish started from similar roots, their journeys through history began to move in different directions. Scotland, over time, became more closely tied to its neighbor, England. This connection was sealed with the Acts of Union in 1707, when Scotland officially joined with England and Wales to form the United Kingdom of Great Britain. From that point forward, Scotland was part of a shared government, economy, and royal family. While Scottish culture remained strong, it became closely linked with British politics and identity. Ireland, however, followed a different road. Though it was ruled by the British for many centuries, the Irish people never fully accepted it. Ireland experienced centuries of colonial control, famines, rebellions, and a deep longing for freedom. After years of struggle, violence, and negotiation, most of Ireland finally gained independence in the 20th century, forming what we now call the Republic of Ireland in 1949. Religion also drew a dividing line. During the Scottish Reformation, much of Scotland embraced Protestantism, shaping its churches, politics, and identity. Meanwhile, Ireland remained strongly Catholic, especially in the south. This religious divide added another layer of difference between the two nations. So even though their ancient roots were shared, the Irish and Scottish developed separate identities, shaped by their unique political struggles, faith traditions, and relationships with Britain. These differences became part of what made each people proud of their path, even as they remembered their common past. Now, let's talk science. In the age of DNA testing and ancestry maps, we can finally look beyond old stories and legends to see what genetics tells us. And what we find is fascinating. Modern genetic research confirms that the Irish and Scottish are indeed very closely related, particularly in the western regions of Scotland. This lines up perfectly with the historical accounts of Gaelic settlers who sailed from Ireland to what is now Western Scotland over 1,500 years ago. These groups didn't just bring language and culture, they brought their bloodlines too. People from Northern and Western Ireland often share common genetic markers with people from Western Scotland, showing a clear ancestral link. This is strong evidence that these populations were once part of the same extended Gaelic family. However, DNA also reveals where the two groups diverged. The Scottish, especially in the north and east, carry additional ancestry from the Picts, the mysterious tribes who lived in ancient Scotland before the Gaels arrived. There is also a strong trace of Norse Viking ancestry, due to centuries of Viking raids and settlements in Scottish coastal regions. The Irish, by contrast, show stronger links to early Celtic groups and even to ancient populations from the Iberian Peninsula, such as Spain and Portugal. Their DNA shows less Viking influence overall, so in the end, they're not identical, but they're close. Think of the Irish and Scottish as siblings with a shared past and overlapping heritage, but with a few different branches in their family trees. Let's look at something most people carry with them every day: their surnames. Family names aren't just words. They tell stories about ancestry, location, and deep cultural roots. In Ireland, many traditional surnames begin with O or Mac. O means descendant of, while Mac means son of. Names like O'Brien, O'Connor, and McCarthy go back hundreds of years and often reflect the name of a legendary ancestor, chieftain, or family leader. In Scotland, you'll see Mac names everywhere too, like MacDonald, MacLeod, or MacGregor. These names follow the same pattern, using Mac to indicate son of. It's a clear sign of their shared Gaelic heritage. What's even more fascinating is that some surnames in Ireland and Scotland come from the same ancient clans, but have taken on different forms or spellings through time. For example, the Irish name O'Dubgail means descendant of the dark foreigner, which likely referred to Norse settlers. In Scotland, this evolved into MacDougall, meaning son of the dark foreigner. Two names from two lands, but clearly from one origin. Many Scottish and Irish clans also had family crests, mottos, and tartans, symbols of pride and loyalty passed down through generations. These systems of identity were deeply rooted in tribal structure and often crossed over between the two nations through marriage, migration, and war. So, when you see a Gaelic name, you're not just looking at a label, you're looking at a link to shared Celtic ancestry that binds Ireland and Scotland more closely than many realize. Even though the Irish and Scottish come from the same Celtic roots and once shared a common Gaelic language, time has caused their speech and identity to evolve in different ways. The Irish accent is often described as musical, flowing, and smooth, especially in the western parts of the country. It has a soft rhythm, and many listeners find it warm and lyrical. In contrast, Scottish accents tend to be broader and stronger, with deeper tones and more abrupt sounds, especially in the Highlands and Lowlands. In some regions of Scotland, the accent can be so thick that even native English speakers from other countries find it hard to understand. Over time, each country also developed its own spoken dialects. In Ireland, the Irish Gaelic language remains a cultural treasure, though it's mostly spoken in specific regions. In Scotland, however, another language evolved alongside Gaelic, simply called Scots. It's not Gaelic, but rather a Germanic language with roots closely related to English. Words like bairn for child or ken for know are everyday Scots words. These differences in accent, language, and vocabulary reflect centuries of change, shaped by different rulers, education systems, and religious influences. Ireland held on to more of its Gaelic identity, while Scotland was deeply affected by British integration and the Reformation. As a result, even though they once sounded more alike, modern Irish and Scottish people now speak and sound quite differently, reinforcing the idea that they are two separate nations with their own proud voices. Now let's talk about what sets them apart today. Ask an Irish person if they're Scottish, and you'll likely hear a polite but clear, "No, not at all." Ask a Scottish person the same question in reverse, and they'll probably smile and say, "Definitely not." That reaction doesn't come from dislike, it comes from pride. Because national identity is not just about DNA, ancient roots, or shared traditions. It's about how people see themselves and what they've gone through as a nation. Today, Irish identity is shaped by a long and emotional journey. Centuries of colonial rule, famine, rebellion, and eventually, freedom and independence. The Irish are deeply proud of their language, their folk music, and their unique role as a strong, independent republic. Their Catholic faith, in many parts of the country, is also closely tied to their cultural identity. On the other hand, Scottish identity has its own strength. Scots take pride in their clans, castles, and ancient traditions, but also in their contribution to British history, including science, politics, and global trade. Their pride often includes things like Highland games, bagpipes, and of course, Scotch whiskey. And while Scotland is part of the United Kingdom, there's still a strong and growing sense of Scottish nationalism, especially in recent years. So even with shared Celtic blood and roots, the Irish and Scottish have developed into two distinct peoples, each with their own voice, values, and national pride. Different histories, different struggles, but equal in strength and spirit. But let's not forget the deeper truth that history often whispers quietly, and that is, connection doesn't disappear just because people grow apart. Even though the Irish and Scottish stand today as two proud and distinct nations, they still carry the same ancient Celtic roots in their blood and stories. These are not distant strangers. They are more like family members who took different journeys, shaped by time, war, faith, and politics. They both share similar languages, born from the Gaelic tongue, and symbols like the Celtic knot, the triskele, and clan crests that speak of a common past. Their surnames echo with the same patterns: Mac, O, and names passed down from heroic ancestors who once roamed the same Green Isles. They also share a long history of migration and exchange. For centuries, people moved back and forth across the sea between Ireland and Scotland, trading goods, marrying across clans, and even fighting on each other's soil. Some Irish families have Scottish cousins, and many Scottish people today can trace part of their lineage back to Ireland. And what binds them still is a deep respect for land, language, music, and memory. Their folk songs may have different tunes, but they often tell the same kind of stories about love, loss, bravery, and belonging. In many ways, the Irish and Scottish are branches of the same tree, stretching in different directions, but growing from a shared root planted long ago. That connection still lives, not just in the past, but in the hearts of both peoples today. Now back to the big question: are they the same people? The answer isn't simple, but it's clear. Not exactly, but they're very close. The Irish and Scottish both descend from Celtic ancestors, carrying the legacy of ancient tribes that once spanned across Europe and found their last strongholds in the Western Isles. They once spoke the same language, lived by the same laws, and believed in the same myths passed down through oral traditions. Their Gaelic world was one and the same, until time began to pull them in different directions. There were periods of migration and movement, where Irish settlers crossed into Scotland and helped lay the foundations of what would become a new kingdom. They brought with them their culture, language, and kinship systems, essentially transplanting Irish roots into Scottish soil. They still share traditions, music, symbols, and names. They both value community, storytelling, nature, and spiritual heritage. They even look to the same festivals, like Samhain and Beltane, to honor their past. But then came centuries of change. Different wars, rulers, churches, and alliances. Ireland fought for its independence. Scotland entered a union. One became a republic. The other remained part of a kingdom. One leaned Catholic, the other leaned Protestant. These choices and experiences slowly shaped two separate identities, two different nations with their own pride and story. So are they the same people? Not completely, but they're family. They are cousins in culture, siblings in spirit, and kin by history. And that connection, though ancient, still lives on today. So if you're Irish, Scottish, or just curious about your roots, remember this: these ancient connections are not just about race or DNA. They're about shared stories, songs, struggles, and pride. So next time you hear bagpipes or see a Celtic knot, know that you're witnessing a link between two amazing peoples, different, but deeply connected. Now it's your turn. Were you surprised by how closely related the Irish and Scottish really are? Do you have family ties to either side? Or maybe both? Tell us in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. And if you enjoyed this journey through Celtic history, help us grow this community by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with someone who loves Ireland, Scotland, or history in general. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.